Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane. I'm your host, Shane Fordham. I know it's been a minute. I apologize for the absence. To those wondering, what took so long, I'm not gonna lie to you. I left my laptop at Disney World. I had a family reunion out in Florida a few weeks ago. Thought my laptop was packed up after the trip, and it was a rough rough awakening realization I had when it was not packed. So it's been a rough few weeks. I've missed talking to y'all. I've missed uploading and reporting and speaking my truth. But we're back. We're back. All gas, no brakes. We are back starting this week. We're talking the HAASON Reddick situation today. Now, as you know, HAASON Reddick was traded from the Eagles to the Jets back in April in exchange for Bryce Huff, but has now recently requested a trade. And I was sad to see him go, from the Eagles. That's one of my favorite players in the league. It's one of the main guys that I would watch the most when I was playing a couple years ago. He averaging 12 and a half sacks over these past 4 years, had 16 sacks the year the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, 5 forced fumbles. So it was definitely sad to see him go. He's one of them ones. That's one of the premier pass rushers in the league. In my opinion, the most underrated pass rusher in the league. But he was traded to the Jets, and when you think about it, it was a good decision at the time. I see that now. We'll get into that later, but the Jets have placed themselves in a difficult position. I don't know. I mean, I want to know what's going on in New York. Like, is there something in the water that these execs are drinking that just makes them make terrible decisions? What's going on out there in New York? Because it's hard to judge what the dumber move was between the Giants letting Saquon walk for free, not even a bag of chips and water, or the Jets trading for a guy who they had to have known they couldn't afford once they put the ink to the once they put the ink to the paper. Like, I honestly feel like this was the dumbest move. Like, this honestly takes the cake and makes the Jets, I think, in my opinion, the dumbest franchise in all of football. I mean, you give away a young guy who really has the potential to grow into what HAASON Reddick is. You give him away to the Eagles for a guy, a premier edge rusher who is a great talent, but who you can't afford and keep on the team. And this was a dumb move for so many reasons, but what stands out to me the most is the timing of it all. The Giants front office has now put the team in a position where they are now fighting battles on two different fronts. Like, they weakened their defense at a time when the offense is still working through the kinks in Aaron Rodgers coming back off his Achilles injury, let alone being a 40-year-old who is coming off an Achilles injury. There's already a certain caution that comes with dealing to dealing with a QB1, a franchise QB1 in training camp, in practice, in drills, scrimmages, things of that nature. But that caution is heightened when it's an injured QB1 who is also your franchise guy, who is also 40 years old. Like, I remember my freshman year of college playing at Hampton. My D-line coach at the time, Marcus Dixon, who is now the D-line coach for the Minnesota Vikings, great coach, great leader, great guy to play for. He would tell us in the film room, whenever we were in the film room watching our tape back from practice, win your one-on-one battles, cool. Get in the backfield, cool. But you always stay away from the quarterback. Something I learned from him is that, in the league, especially if you're like a practice squad guy, if you get too close to the quarterback and God forbid you do anything that causes that quarterback to get hurt, you get too close to him and he, in a throwing motion, his hand comes down and he breaks his finger or injures his wrist on your helmet or something, you're cut. Like, you're out of there. Like, they're packing up your locker and stuff for you probably before practice is over. Like, you're getting sent home that day. He always used to tell us to stay away from the quarterback, but stay away from the QB1 franchise guy. I'm not going to say the actual word that he used. I'm not going to use that actual word on here, but stay the blank away from this guy. Like, I remember my freshman year, that's the same year that we had, or that DeAndre Francois had transferred in from Florida State. Francois, one of the most renowned collegiate QBs at the time, great teammate, great guy to play with, great leader on a team, great guy to have on your squad, super athletic, strong arm. That was our franchise guy. That was our first year in the Big South. That's the guy who we're putting all our eggs in. We're going to be able to make a playoff push our first year in the Big South. Coach Dixon in the film room, he would say, looking at the QB position as a whole, you stay away from the QB. But looking at Francois, you stay away from that guy. you better not come within a hair of that guy. Stay away from him, because that guy is too important to hurt and is too important and crucial to the future of this team. So there's already a caution when it comes to dealing with your franchise when it comes to dealing with quarterbacks. But when it's your franchise quarterback, QB1, who is now also injured, who is also 40 years old, that caution is heightened. So Aaron Rodgers, there was already a level of protocol with him in practice to begin with, but that was heightened now that he is coming off of an Achilles injury. He's not getting reps in practice like that. He's not playing in preseason. So he's not used to throwing. He's already not used to throwing under pressure, when it comes to building a rapport and a chemistry with his new teammates and receivers, for most notably Garrett Wilson, So the Jets are in a difficult position now, easing him into the offense. They're in a difficult position on the offensive side of the ball, but now they have placed themselves in a difficult position on the defensive side of the ball, because now they're at a disadvantage. They now, either way, they now lost a valuable edge rusher in both Bryce Huff and now in HAASON Reddick, because they don't have the money to pay HAASON, so they have to trade him now. And you can only hope that it's enough, that they get enough back in return to somewhat supplement their loss. This was a terrible move by the Jets GM. And it's a fireable move by the Jets GM. I would be surprised if the Jets GM is in business after this season, depending on how the rest of this offseason plays out, the rest of this preseason plays out. But they've placed themselves in a position where now they are fighting battles on two fronts, still in the process of rehabbing their offense, while now trying to repair their defense. You trade for a guy who would have been a valuable piece in addition to Quinnen Williams and Johnson, and then with Sauce Gardner and Reed in the secondary, having the linebackers they do. This was the makings of a contending defense, a contending team. A team that should on paper be a contender when healthy, but they have to rehab their 40-year-old quarterback, and now they have to repair their defense, which really could have been one of the best defenses in the league. So, this was really the dumbest move in football. This takes the cake over the Saquon thing with the Giants. But this type of maneuvering it really just it really has to make you give more respect to Howie Roseman, because if you didn't think Howie Roseman was the best GM in all of football before, then you should have no doubts now, because you can't even say he fleeced the Jets, because they would have had it wasn't a secret that HAASON Reddick was in his contract year. Like, they would have had to know that they were picking up a guy who was due for a new contract for more money. But Howie Roseman, being the genius that he is, which this also serves as an apology for too, because I was not in favor of the trade when this news first broke. HAASON Reddick being one of my favorite players in the league, being the guy who he is, being really our best player on the defensive side of the ball when he was on the team. I was not in favor of this trade. But Howie, being the chess player and the thinker that he is, he knew that HAASON Reddick being in his contract year meant that we would have to pay him in order to keep him. But instead of paying HAASON that money, he used that money to bring in CJ Gardner-Johnson back to the team, helping repair what looked like one of the worst secondaries in the league last season. A guy who led the league in interceptions the year we went to the Super Bowl, helped us to be a Super Bowl defense, and also bringing in Devin White, who is a top 5 linebacker when healthy, pairing him with Nakobe Dean, which is also an investment in Nakobe Dean's future, being able to play with the vet like Devin White. And then with getting rid of HAASON Reddick, getting pieces back for him, you get a pass rusher who is coming into his 5th year, who had 10 sacks last year, a guy who consistently gets better every single year, and who has the potential to be the type of pass rusher that HAASON Reddick is. But then this also gives more minutes to your young guys on the D-line, like Nolan Smith, who has the potential to be a stud in the league. And then you're pairing him with 2 other guys on the D-line who have more of an opportunity now to take a step forward and develop, in Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, now that Fletcher Cox has moved on and retired. So this Eagles defense is really is a really exciting unit, and is something we really need to keep our eyes on, because this is a unit that really has the potential to be the best defense in the league again this year. Again. And we know what a good defense means for the Eagles. Every time the Eagles have had a top defense in the league within these past 10 years, the Eagles go to a Super Bowl. We had the best defense in 2017 with Malcolm Jenkins, BG, Chris Long, Michael Bennett, Fletcher Cox, of course. That was a Super Bowl. We had the best defense in 2022 with Javon Hargrave and Josh Sweat and BG, Fletcher Cox, HAASON Reddick, guys who had 16 sacks, 11 sacks, 16 and 11 sacks, with Darius Slay and James Bradbury on the side, CJ Gardner-Johnson out deep playing at the safety position. This could really, this is a young defensive core who already has the potential to be, if not the best defense, then at least a top 5 defense, if not this year, the next year. You more minute Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis have more of an opportunity to develop and mature their games on the interior D-line this year. Josh Sweat has already shown that he can be a really good number 2 option when it comes to rushing the passer. Nolan Smith and Bryce Huff now get an opportunity to get more minutes and more opportunities than what they've previously had in order to mature their games. We reinforced the linebacker core with Devin White, pairing him with Nakobe Dean and bringing in Zach Bond from New Orleans to reinforce what was arguably a weaker unit for us than the secondary last year. So you really have to admire the genius of Howie Roseman in this roster move and how he has operated this offseason, and how he turned what would have been a loss for any other team and what is going to end up being a loss for the Jets, turning that into a win for us, allowing us to pick up more pieces on the defense, that pieces that not only were that are good to have, but are pieces that we desperately needed in areas that suffered drastically last year in compared to the year before, which was the year the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. So this is really this. I mean, honestly, it's really interesting and hilarious how this played out in our favor and how it ended up hurting the Jets, because the Jets are also a franchise that have made stupid decisions, that have a history of stupid decisions. Most recently being drafting Zach Wilson at number 2 overall. So this will be interesting to see how the Jets front office are able to kind of turn this around and recover from this loss, and how this plays out as the preseason progresses and as they get ready for the regular season. And I'm gonna be excited to see what happens next, so I can come on here and rant about it. But that's all for today's episode of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to support us on all social media platforms with a like, follow, and subscribe. And we will be back later this week with more shameless takes.